I'm Zunaira Azhar, and you are watching Epicenter, where we dissect, analyze, and help define major domestic and global stories. Asif Ali Zardari, the first civilian president of Pakistan to complete his tenure, has now made a comeback at the same position for the second time. Call it his political acumen or sheer luck, the fact is that Pakistan People's Party under Asif Ali Zardari has not only managed to survive the very complex political landscape of Pakistan, but has garnered immense leverage around his traditional rivals. Now, what needs to be seen is that how well this Shehbaz and Zardari duo that is known for their reconciliation is going to manage the country when it comes to governance, political instability, and economic crisis. To discuss this, we have been joined by Fahad Hussain, our regular panelist and a senior journalist, political commentator. And we have also been joined by Mohammad Malick, again a seasoned journalist and a political analyst. Fahad, I'm coming straight to you. No position in the cabinet, no executive power, but there is an elephant in the room that we can't ignore. How do you see that?
Well, depends who you're referring to when you mention the elephant in the room, because there are so many elephants in the room nowadays.
The power broker, Zardari.
Okay. Well, clearly, I mean, he's finally worked his way back to the highest office in the land, and I think it goes to his credit that despite the ups and downs that he's faced, despite all the difficulties and the challenges and the political, really difficult political situations that he's faced in the last couple of years, or at least since he was, the inhabitant of this house last time. I think it goes to his credit that he's been able to negotiate his way back into the presidency. But this time around, of course, it's a different situation, it's a different equation, and it's a different country in many ways. So I think it will be very interesting to see how Mr. Zardari can play a very effective role as compared to the one that he played last time, and whether he can actually still be as relevant in this current context as he was when he was in the presidency last, and when it was his party and his prime minister who was ruling and not an allied party. So I think it's a different time, different set of challenges, but the same person.
Okay, Mr. Malick, same question to you. How do you see this time, this combination panning out? Because Fahad thinks it's a different country, it's a different situation this time.
It's a way more interesting country. The last time Mr. Zardari was in office, it was really a powerful office. The president could dismiss the government. Article 58(2)(b) powers were there. He actually, under the 18th Amendment, gave away those powers. But today, without having 58(2)(b) powers, he can actually dislodge the government.
Okay.
The PMLN-led government is totally dependent on People's Party to stay in power. They pull the rug. They can easily pull the rug any time. So even though his office doesn't have the power to dismiss the government, his party has all the power to bring down the government. So I think he's in a very, very powerful position right now, and he's not taking any executive positions like you pointed out earlier. So they are not part of the government, yet they are the government. They enjoy the element of plausible deniability when it comes to tough decisions. But I think the real picture would emerge once the budget is passed, because the budget can't pass, and that's about 2 months from now. The budget can't pass without their support, and they would have to share the blame partially for a lot of tough decisions. I think the political game would become very clear once the budget is passed, who stands where. Then the question also, 2-3 key appointments are yet to be made. We're waiting for the announcement of the finance minister. Now the gossip about who's going to be the interior minister, name of Mohsen Naqvi is being bandied about, the former chief minister of Punjab, who was supposed to be a nominee of the army chief when it came to being the caretaker chief minister in Punjab. I don't think that's going to happen, but the mere fact that his name is being bandied about, that's a very interesting development. So I think once we see the cabinet, we already know what the Zardari equation means. He's gotten also probably the highest votes ever for a presidential candidate. So he is in a really good place right now. He's in a very good, and I think more important than that, the army is eyeing his position as somebody who can ultimately broker peace between PTI and army also. So Zardari Sahab is not only very important for the PMLN people, I think he's set to play a very important role when it comes to the overall political equation, because ultimately PTI and army have to talk to one another. Right now they're talking at each other. PTI will have to take a step back, army will ultimately have to take a step back. Zardari Sahab might be that neutral venue where people meet. If you remember, when Imran Khan had a really bad time with General Bajwa also, where did they meet? They met in President Albi's place. So presidency, a neutral reconciliation ground in Pakistan. Too many things interesting happening.
Okay, but let me get back to this various question that everybody is talking about. Fahad, what happened to Bilawal Bhutto Zardari's position? Because everybody was eyeing on the fact that the entire campaign of Pakistan People's Party was focused on the young and charismatic leadership of Bilawal Bhutto. And now we see his father in the presidency and he is nowhere to be seen. How do you look at that?
Well, I think Mr. Zardari is weighing the role of Bilawal very carefully. He's the candidate for the prime ministership. That much we are clear, and they've also said it repeatedly. This time around, that was not happening. So it was a difficult choice, and I think Zardari Sahab probably also feels that he shouldn't get Bilawal into the position of the prime minister at a time where the situation is probably the most difficult that we've seen in decades. So he would probably not want to put him in such a precarious position. This time around, of course, if he negotiated really hard, he could have found a space one way or the other for Bilawal to become the prime minister. But I think he probably calculated, and so did other people in his party, that this was not the way to launch him into the prime minister's office. So waiting another term, waiting another couple of years, we don't know. We do know that it is highly unlikely that governments finish their entire 5-year tenure. So given the past track record, perhaps Mr. Zardari is waiting for a better time to launch Bilawal back into the Prime Minister's office, not back into the Prime Minister's office, but for the first time. But for that to happen, it requires a greater leverage within Punjab. He also knows that at this particular point, his party's position in Punjab is very precarious. So perhaps these couple of years, however many years that he's calculated, he would want to have some sort of a better electoral strength in the Punjab, so he can place Bilawal in a better position for a bid for the prime ministership.
Okay, so coming back to the real wheel that has to be pushed, which is IMF. There are imminent decisions to be taken by this government now, and there are no ifs and buts involved. The government is going to IMF, Mr. Malick, and IMF has very clearly stated what they want: broaden the tax base and don't tax the rich, the poor only, the salaried class only, energy sector reforms, institutional governance, and anti-corruption. This is a massive agenda from IMF. Do you think the two parties are going to share it?
Just one comment before that about what Fahad said. I think I totally agree with him. This would have been the worst time to push Bilawal into the Prime Minister's office. All the toughest economic decisions have to be taken and everything, and he's just waiting silently in the wings. In the PDM government, I think Zardari Sahab made a brilliant choice to make him the foreign minister. He got a world exposure, he played on the bigger stage, and now he can easily wait, whether it comes 3 years down the road or 5 years down the road. I think that's a brilliant strategy for him. Coming back to the IMF, as far as I'm concerned, I see IMF as a brilliant thing. I think our prayers as a common man answered. I know this answer might sound shocking to you. Where are we where we are now, right now? We're at the bottom of the pit. Why? Because of the endless bad governance and bad fiscal and monetary decisions of all the governments, whether it was PMLN, People's Party. Everybody kept passing the buck. They did not take policy reform structure changes. They did not make choices that were right and not necessarily popular. Now they have to do all the right things by the force of hand. They don't have a choice. I mean, what is it? People keep abusing IMF. What does IMF say? IMF say broaden your tax base. IMF says reduce government expenses. IMF says spend less than what you earn. IMF says get rid of loss-making state-owned enterprises. What is wrong in what IMF is saying? Now, like you gave an example of taxation. Right now, the salaried is directly paying one of the highest tax brackets in the world. Then you pay indirect taxes in the form of all the things being imposed on petrol, fuel, all this stuff. So it's a very unfair tax regime. Government itself says over 800 billion a year are being lost through tax collection frauds.
Right.
You're losing you have trillions, everything. So IMF has to come in, and I think IMF just might save this country.
While Mr. Malick rightly pointed out that there is nothing wrong with what IMF is demanding, but everything is wrong with the way that we handle IMF. That is the problem. So Fahad, do you think something is going to change this time? Because last time we saw Ishaq Dar as a finance minister offended IMF multiple times. Then Mr. Shehbaz Sharif had to intervene and we got that standby agreement. Is there anything different this time you are expecting?
Well, I think the good news is that the new Prime Minister was the old Prime Minister when all of this happened. And I think he understands perfectly well the essential requirement that we have for IMF. Mr. Shehbaz Sharif has zero doubts that we need to go back to the IMF. We need to, of course, negotiate a very good program, but it is a program that is required for us. And therefore, as you very correctly pointed out, in the last PDM government, it was he who had to put his foot down to make sure that we go back to the IMF. This time around, from what we're hearing, we will have a new finance minister. And Mr. Shehbaz Sharif is again 100% clear that we have to go back to the IMF as quickly as possible. He was saying that even before he was sworn in as the Prime Minister. Now that he is in the hot seat, he's already initiated the process to have the IMF come and speak with us and get the program running. So basically, this time around, I foresee a more smooth entry back into the IMF. We need a new program. We need it as quickly as possible. I think the fact that we have a Prime Minister who is absolutely clear about the need for the IMF, and we will probably have a Finance Minister who is on the same wavelength because he's being chosen by the Prime Minister himself. This combination will allow Pakistan to transition smoothly back into the IMF. That's point number one. Point number two, as Malick Saab said, I tend to agree with him. I think going into the IMF and a program and doing what needs to be done, it is important. Of course, it's going to be very painful, but we have to. There is no way that we can bypass that painful process. I think the best option that we have is to go into the IMF, stick to the program, follow it to the letter, go through these difficult 1 or 2 or 3 years, and then emerge stronger, more stable, and more financially confident.
Well, while we take those difficult decisions to emerge as a more stronger country, the problem is that we do need to galvanize some sort of support from the people. You know, the kitchens are going to be affected, tariffs, gas bills, everything, you know, it's skyrocketing. Mr. Malick, is there any way for this government to give a little hope to the people that these things are temporary? Let's say 2 years around the clock, we are going to be in a better position. How would they translate this to the people?
Again, it's a very tough thing to do, but the point is they can mitigate a lot of stuff. They can mitigate by putting a very quick end to a lot of wastage and drainage. By one conservative estimate, if government spendings are curbed properly and everything, in 24 months, you can take out something like 10,000 billion can be plugged from right now from the system. There's a lot of billions being wasted and we're talking serious hundreds of billions. If you stop that, if you plug that, let's say for example, SOE is one example. You privatize PIA today. Everything is done, everything is on paper. It was done before also. Ishaq Dar Sahab blocked it, and Mohammad Zubair said it in the show also. He revealed it also that two discos were ready, where PIA was ready for privatization. PIA alone is 100 billion every year. Forget about the accumulated losses. 100 billion current. Can't you spend those 100 billion on poor people? You talk about SOEs, you're talking 600 billion a year. That's money you can spend on the poor people. Government wastage. You are talking FBRs, you're talking in hundreds of billions. That money is there to be plucked and saved and spent on people. Now, if you don't want to do that, that's a different story. But money is there, the alternatives are there. They would mitigate things. They're not going to end the misery of people. And again, both these governments are responsible. Three governments are responsible. Imran Khan's government, Nawaz Sharif's government, and People's Party's government. Had they done proper policy making, people would not have had to be bundled with all the right decisions at the same time. These things would have come in spaces, in stages, and they would have been absorbed. But yes, the government can mitigate if they don't spend money on stupid schemes. Just one thing more. Billions of worth of rupees schemes are right now in the pipe works that are way away from finishing, whether it's Punjab's PSDP, federal governments or provincial. They need to only finish schemes that are critically important, that really make a difference, and stop the other schemes, use that money to alleviate people's suffering. You have to do a lot of planning at provincial level, at federal level, but there are things you can play around. You can indeed mitigate.
Well, coming to the hardcore
if I could jump in, Zunaira, on this.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
If you allow me, just to add to this, I've also been speaking to a lot of people and trying to understand what the government can do in these very difficult circumstances. Obviously, I'm not an economist, so I won't be able to give you hard economic analysis. But from what I've heard people say, experts, I think the options that the government has in these tough times to provide any kind of relief to the people are very limited. But they are available. And one of them, of course, is trying to curtail the federal government's expenditure by looking at what Benazir Bhutto has already mentioned, the somehow eliminating the duplication between federal government and provincial government, the ministries that are not required, the divisions that are not required at the federal level. So that's one of the processes by which you can save, the federal government can save a lot of money. Secondly, of course, this whole issue of privatization. It's a slow process, but for example, like PIA, the privatization of PIA is at an advanced level. So all of this can be speeded up also. I know for sure that Shahbaz Saab has been wanting the privatization process to be fast-tracked. That can happen, and the saving would be in the billions. Then also, remember the massive amounts of bleeding that these discos do. They also need to be reformed, either privatized or given to the provinces. There are various options. But all of these steps are those which can actually provide some fiscal space to the federal government, but these require very strong political choices. They require some very difficult but confident decision making. And I think if the federal government can do this, which it should, it will have at least some space to provide relief to the people.
Well, this is
but Fahd, let me just 1 second. I want to add in something.
Okay.
Fahd, this thing that they're talking about, we say giving the discos to provinces, that's again passing the buck, because it won't. I was talking to a lot of energy experts. They said it won't make a difference. First, the same muck-up that is happening at the federal level will happen at the provincial level. It's just the federal government passing the buck to the provincial government, just book adjustment. Unless they're privatized, they're not going to change, because then it becomes a provincial problem, but it stays the people's problem. So the only technical places change. Privatization, they need to privatize these things.
Well,
and that privatization is actually very difficult because, there are so many vested interests involved in this. Massive amounts of...
With Dasab not around, it just might happen.
Well,
one of the biggest impediments was Dasab. With him gone, I think a lot will happen.
Well, let's see if he is gone and he's arriving. If he is arriving at the foreign affairs front, then there is so much that is yet to be seen. But coming to the hardcore domestic front,
that's disaster. That's Mofa's problem, and I can only sympathize with them.
All right, we'll come to that later. For now, I want to discuss some hardcore political realities at the domestic front. PTI is constantly at a protest. They are constantly challenging the elections, whole that rigged thing, and they are asking for an election audit. They have also called for the protests. But the thing is that there have been voices from within the Senate, from very senior senators, about reconciliation, grand dialogues, unfinished business from the Charter of Democracy. And when I say senior senators, I mean Ishaq Dar, I mean Mushahid Hussain Sayyid. So is there a way that we can talk about some kind of reconciliation when it comes to the establishment and PTI, because the problem primarily exists between the two? And let me add here, the recent communique from the Corps Commanders Conference was very clear on how they are going to handle the perpetrators of 9th May. So Fahad, do you see any reconciliation happening anytime soon?
Well, I don't see that kind of reconciliation happening in the short term, because the divisions are so deep and so wide, and there is no flexibility from either side. We know for sure that the establishment is absolutely clear on where they stand when it comes to the PTI, and if there was any doubt, the announcement after the Corps Commanders conference, the statement that was given out, I think made it absolutely clear that there was zero backtracking in terms of the May 9th situation and everything else. Now that leaves the PTI. They are in a difficult situation, but they're also in a position where they know that they have proved their electoral strength in the last election. So they still have a seat on the table. The original plan or the original intent or the original desire was to cut PTI down to size. That hasn't happened. So now they have a seat on the table. Now the question is, what do they do with that seat? Do they negotiate? Do they try and engage the establishment by being a little bit more flexible in their position, or do they just sit there and act the way that they've always been acting? So far, the indications are that Mr. Imran Khan is in no mood to be flexible, unless, of course, there is some truth to rumors that there is some behind the door negotiations going on. But in the medium term, I think there is no choice for the PTI but to mend fences with the establishment. Now, the question is how that would happen. I believe that ultimately, yes, the establishment also knows that PTI is a reality, and it is a reality that is not going to go away anytime soon. So, therefore, some sort of an engagement in the medium term is bound to happen. However, there is one extra factor that I would like to mention here, and that is the performance of this government, the new government. If they can, in the short term, let's say in the next 6 months, they can actually show that they are serious about governance, that they are making the kind of decisions that need to be required, that they are actually undertaking those difficult reforms that everybody wants. If they can manage to do that, I think the dependency of the establishment on the PTI would probably lessen to a degree. But if the government is seen in the next 6 months as more of the same, then I think the reality of the PTI is going to start asserting itself even more, and the establishment would then be even more willing to somehow engage with the PTI.
Well, I would like to take the same question to Mr. Malick, but it's time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Epicenter once again. And Mr. Malick, as we were discussing before the break, the PTI syndrome, I don't see any reason why can't there be an election audit, just for the sake of it, so that the things settle down for good, because everybody is talking about the rigging in elections. Do you see any sort of reconciliation? One. Two, do you see any sort of body being formulated for an audit of the elections?
There are two ground realities. One reality is elections were stolen from PTI, and now they're in opposition. The other reality is that PMLN and People's Party, they could not have been in power had the elections not been stolen, but they are in power. This is the ground reality. Now, the secondary reality comes in. What happens now? Obviously, you've talked about audit. Everybody knows Form 45 controversy, and we know what a massive scale things were done after the polling was over. Now, if there's an audit, there's a very smart move by Imran Khan when he says, okay, let's have another 4 audits at least. And one of them is Nawaz Sharif's Halka in Lahore, On Chaudhry, Noor Alam, and one more. Now, Forget about all the three. Imagine there's an audit, a genuine audit, and Nawaz Sharif loses his seats in Lahore. He's already lost the one in Mansehra. Do you know what that means? Do you know the impact, the political impact? It's not about one seat. It's about Nawaz Sharif Saab losing from Lahore. It's about the PMLN Supremo losing from Lahore. That would start a cascading effect that is impossible to fathom where it stops and how it happens. No, I don't think anything is going to happen right now. Fahad pointed out something very important. The next 6 months' performance of the new government is going to be a very critical factor. That factor, I think, will play the strongest role in either further hardening the stance of the military establishment or softening of stance by PTI. Because very tough decisions have to be taken. It's going to have a lot of reaction by people. And, you know, it's going to be a spark. It's going to be a sort of, we are sitting on a political powder keg. Anything can ignite an explosion, stuff like that. So it's a combo of all three. Right now, Imran Khan doesn't have a choice but to keep up the pressure. He's the only one, if he softens up, he'll lose his support base. He has no option but to keep the temperatures very high. And right now, after the electoral results, despite armies, everything, he is on a genuine political high. And knowing Imran Khan as a person, you know that when he's on a winning streak, he's really aggressive. And when he's on a losing streak, he's even more aggressive. So either way, it's a difficult situation to deal with him. I don't think it's an issue between organizations. I'll be very blunt about it. I think it ultimately boils down to the clash of two personalities. One is General Asim Munir and the other is Imran Khan. I've repeatedly said in my shows, both will have to step out of their skin. Both will have to probably go against the grain of their personalities and then take certain decisions. Then we might come towards a rapprochement. Otherwise, like we said, the earlier three issues, how this government performs or performs badly, how it manages to mitigate certain circumstances. And I think even when you take tough decisions and the people see a government trying to cut down at expenses, trying to do the right things, it does get a lot of allowance from people. So it's sort of a hopeless situation for government. But I think at this point as we speak, I don't see the establishment feeling any need to talk to Imran. They have everything in place that they want. They want to have a government of their choice. They have everything working in the direction they want. They have gone the extra mile to keep Imran out. They have done that. So I think the next 6 months to 6 months at least, I don't see any softening of stance between establishment and PTI. And the most alarming thing is, if we see army convictions happening in military courts on the May 9th thing, they're only, according to my information, a lot of cases are almost complete. The Supreme Court has barred them from announcing the results. Now, if that petition is resolved in government's favor, and those military courts are allowed to announce verdicts, and obviously those verdicts are going to be against PTI people, that will add a totally different dimension to the whole thing. So I think that is the most important thing that is under the rug right now.
Right.
Let's see what happens to the military courts issues, and that will really shape a lot of things to come.
Well, Fahad, I'm really talking from the point of view of the Gen Z. You know, people who are so much in number and they are so used to see things through the lens of social media. And there are optics created within last 2 years which are not very good for this generation and for that matter for everyone. So there has to be a way, there has to be a middle ground where both the parties could come in and at least settle for something. What would it take for army to, you know, take that hard position a little lower? And what would it take Imran Khan to be a little softened towards his own stance of different kind of conspiracy theories that he keeps on floating, which are actually, you know, very problematic, and they are the problem actually when it comes to the reconciliation.
You're right. They are the problem. And also another problem is the fact that Mr. Imran Khan is now obviously disconnected to an extent from whatever is happening. His access is limited. There's only so few people who can meet him. I don't know the sources of information that he has available in his jail, how deeply and closely he's monitoring what's happening. Is he actually, does he have a finger on the pulse of of the political situation as deeply or as closely as someone who would be here on the ground. So these are the realities, and the longer that he is there, and the deeper this issue would become. And I say that because remember now, one of the key challenges for the PTI would be its decision making. At least one of the greatest challenges right now is who's making what decisions on which issues, on what times. The reason I say that is because we know that Imran Khan is the key decision maker, in fact, the only decision maker when it comes to important things or important issues. But he is not available. His access is limited. And PTI has a government in KP. That government and its chief minister has to make decisions on a day-to-day basis, in fact, on an hour-to-hour basis. He won't have access to Imran Khan to consult on every small detail, as they are in the habit of. Again, if you look at the National Assembly, they've got a new leader of the opposition, Mr. Umar Ayub. It's a very large opposition. They have to make decisions constantly. Small decisions, big decisions, legislation, committee proceedings, meetings with the government, etc., etc. Now, if there are multiple pillars of decision making within the PTI in the absence of Mr. Imran Khan, there could be serious lack of coordination. There could also be serious lack of timing, because a decision made not made at the right time is no decision. So I think when we talk about how Mr. Imran Khan is going to engage with the establishment, we have to also place it in the context of the very challenging situation that PTI finds itself when it comes to such engagement, and when it also comes to giving signals or providing some sort of a feedback on the larger issues that are very close to the establishment. Point one. Point two, see, the government is in place. There is a certain momentum, a certain rhythm to governance. Decisions are made in the government, issues happen, and things move very fast. And if Mr. Imran Khan is not connected to that flow, his decision making could also suffer. So bottom line, as far as I'm concerned, is that if Imran Khan Saab and his party cannot somehow synchronize how they're going to make key decision making in the coming months and years, they will find themselves in a very difficult situation.
Well, this is a very pertinent point that you've made. And Mr. Malick, I wonder who is the actual contact person when it comes to understand or focus on what Imran Khan is saying, what the actual instructions are, what is he thinking, how the information from outside the jail is flowing to him. This has become really complex, and I think this is part of the problem.
No, it always is, and I think that was the strategy of the establishment also, to create these disconnects. But earlier you were asking, what is the solution? I think the solution is a very strong arbiter, somebody who they both trust, both the military leadership and Imran Khan. Because what's the fair here? The current military leadership is convinced, at least that's what we are told in private, that Imran Khan and Pakistan don't work together. Imran Khan is convinced that the current military leadership in Pakistan don't work together. There's a fear in the current military leadership, if Imran Khan comes into power, he'll come gunning after the top man and people who supported him. So and there's a fear on Imran Khan's side that if I relent or show the slightest flexibility, it might be seen as a sign of weakness, and they will further, push me down the hole. So there needs to be a strong arbiter. Sit down and tell both of them, okay, we can coexist.
Who do you think that might be?
And I don't have no idea, because I do have one thing, that somebody very important in the Middle East, a prince who is almost a king, was contacted, and he was requested, but he sort of stepped out of it. He said, right now is not the time. We need somebody like that, whether from within or outside. Frankly, I don't have anyone in mind right now. I'm just talking about the formula. Because there's so much mistrust and fear, and it's that either or mentality, that's the most dangerous part. So maybe that will come down. But like I said earlier, this disconnect is not by chance. This disconnect of Imran Khan being done is by design, and I think Imran Khan knows it also. And you might have noticed it that, I think was it yesterday or day before, when announcement was made that as far as the health announcements of Khan Sahib are concerned, they'll be made by his sister. The political ones are to be made by Mr. Gaur. So how many subsections is he going to create?
Yeah.
That this thing is going to be that, like Fahad pointed out, it is a serious issue, and then there are divisions within the party. Like, for example, very quickly, when elections were happening in KP, and it was clear that Gandapur might be the chosen man, people like Shahram Tarkei, people like 2-3 others, they were forced to only contest elections. You know, they were told, no, you can't. We shouldn't be in the provincial assembly, because Khan Sahib said, I want very strong people in the center. But that was not the thing. The deck was being cleared for this guy to become the CM. So interpolitical, inter-party rivalries, those are there. Then lack of connection. These things add up. These things do add up, and I think it's not going to be easy for Khan Sahib to maintain a smooth flow.
Yeah, and it is yet to be seen that this whole lot of black coats brigade that has taken over PTI or Ittihad Council, I mean, all the lawyers who have taken over the seats, the main leadership, how they are going to behave in the parliament, how supportive they are going to be of the legislation and with the government, and whether it's going to be, again, their typical lawyers' part that we see in the court, in the parliament again. Let's take a short break here. Welcome to Epicenter once again, and Fahad, I'm coming directly to you because there is a very comprehensive response from Washington on what is going on in Pakistan at the moment. Matthew Miller has issued a very comprehensive set of emails towards Dawn, and it says that the US Department has conveyed a very clear message to Pakistan's new rulers, emphasizing the importance of collaboration with IMF. So one, they are directing us to collaborate with IMF, to work with IMF, and two, there is this talk of counterterrorism once again. Are we moving towards a more strategic relationships with US with this new government in place, or is it going to be the same non-NATO ally status for Pakistan with a special focus on counterterrorism?
Well, I think the major challenge for Pakistan, for any government right now, is to essentially try and balance the relationship between China and the US, and that's I think tightrope walking at its extreme. What I do know is that China will, of course, remain the first priority, and what I see happening right now is a greater emphasis on CPEC. I also see much more focus on speeding up those projects and linking up with China on a number of other things, because that is what is one of the key priorities of the new Prime Minister. But at the same time, what we also know is that the relationship with the US is absolutely crucial, not just in terms of counterterrorism in Afghanistan, but also on a number of other issues. But remember, it's an election year in the US. And during election years, generally, traditionally, the US government does not get too deeply involved in issues which are not of direct relevance at that particular time. So Pakistan is, I don't believe it is within the core interest of the US right now. We are on the peripheries, of course, when it comes to Afghanistan and a number of other issues. But right now in election year, I don't see any major initiatives happening. If there is a change in the White House, then all kinds of new things and new policies and new options and new challenges could open up. So I think this particular year would probably be Pakistan watching very closely how the US goes into an election year, and the US probably waiting to see how its policies and interests align with Pakistan in the region.
Well, Mr. Malick, you must have seen this very comprehensive statement by Matthew Miller. He has almost touched all the issues, human rights, freedom of expression, and you name it. But the key question remains here is that regardless of which party is in power or which person is in the White House, the policy towards Pakistan almost remains the same. And this time around, again, we are looking at a war. A spillover of Gaza is here. And then we have some sort of hostile relations with Iran in our neighbor. International Atomic Energy Commission is coming after Iran once again. So this region is going to be again hot. Do you see a spillover coming over to this, at this time when the new government has just taken in?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Fahad over there. I think we are way down the priority list of the American government right now. For us, it might be very important what's coming out of Washington, but are we that important to Washington? Not really. And when the Afghanistan issue was alive, they needed us there. When all those things were there, we are also looked at through the India prism. America would not want us to become a sort of more than a niggle in the shoe, actually, because we are seen in the Chinese camps and all that. We can only do a certain balancing act. And I've seen over the years, if you see the American foreign policy, when countries are not on their top priority list, then usually the policies don't change as much with change of administrations, and the system sort of takes over. So I think right now Pakistan's significance is at the systems level in the US hierarchy of things.
Yeah, but if you reverse it,
level.
Let me add here, Mr. Malick, if you just reverse it, we do have an uptick when it comes to terrorism in Pakistan. We do see TTP as a core threat once again, and ISKP. So we do need Washington on our side when it comes to counterterrorism. So what about us? How are we looking at it? Are we trying to engage them more?
I think more than that, we need to retool our relationship with the Afghan Taliban. During the last government, I remember, you might remember one day, suddenly the DGISI and the then Defense Minister Khwaja Asif, they flew to Kabul. And it was a one-day visit. And I remember that after that, I met all the relevant people who were part of the delegation and everything. A very interesting thing was shared. They shared that Pakistan had conveyed that, you know, we are having problems with the Taliban people, the Taliban Pakistan, TTP and all that. And the families were situated right across from the border. And the Taliban in Kabul, they told them we need about 15 to 20 billion rupees to move them further deep in. And that would sort of somewhat mitigate your problem. And then I believe Pakistan did pay up about 5 billion or something, but nothing happened on that end. Similarly, when the earlier decision to move some of their families back to Pakistan, that was during Khan Sahab's government, was taken by the army and they were brought back, again it was a hodgepodge thing. The things weren't really worked out. I think more than uptick in terrorism and more than looking at Washington, our security planners really need to go back to the drawing board,
revisit it,
and see who they are talking to, how they are talking to, and then sort of things. And one quick comment I want to make before the break, you talked about the black coats taking over PTI. I think that's another double whammy for Khan Sahab, because most of these guys are first-time politicians and at the same time first-time parliamentarians. So that is going to further add to the mayhem about their behavior in the parliament and how they do. Most of them believe shouting the hardest makes them appear the most loyal and all. So there's a lot of confusion going on.
Right. Thank you so much, Fahad Hussain. Thank you so much, Mr. Mohammad Malick. This concludes our today's discussion, and this is Zunaira Azhar signing out from Center.